What happens when a rising political star walks into what should be a routine interview and decides to burn every bridge in sight? In just 33 seconds of pure television chaos, Jasmine Crockett managed to torpedo her own career with a meltdown so spectacular that it left even the most seasoned talk show host speechless. This is the story of how one woman's arrogance and inability to handle basic questions turned a simple interview into television history. The studio lights were hot that evening as Piers adjusted his tie and glanced at his notes one final time. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman who had been making waves with her outspoken commentary on social media. What was supposed to be a straightforward political discussion was about to become something entirely different. Welcome back to the show. Piers began with his trademark professional smile. I'm here with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Thank you for joining us tonight. Crockett shifted in her chair, already looking uncomfortable under the studio lights. Thanks for having me, I guess. The response was cold, dismissive. Piers raised an eyebrow but pressed on. Now, you've been quite vocal about your positions lately. I wanted to start with your recent comments about border security. Can you explain your stance to our viewers? My stance? Crockett's voice rose slightly. My stance is that people like you always want to put us in a box. You bring us on these shows just to make us look bad. Piers leaned back, genuinely surprised. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what you mean. I'm simply asking about your policy position. Isn't that why politicians come on talk shows? Don't play dumb with me, Crockett snapped. You know exactly what you're doing. This whole setup is designed to make me look foolish. The audience was already shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the usual political sparring they were used to seeing. This felt different, more personal, more volatile. I have to say, I'm a bit confused, Piers replied, maintaining his composure. We sent your team the questions in advance, as we always do. We're following the format we discussed. What exactly is the problem here? Crockett laughed, but there was no humor in it. The problem is that you media people think you can just ambush us whenever you want. Well, I'm not playing your games. Ambush? Piers looked genuinely bewildered. We're literally discussing the topics your office approved. This is exactly what we plan to talk about. Stop lying! Crockett's voice cracked like a whip across the studio. You're trying to make me look stupid in front of all these people. That's what you always do to people like me. The cameramen exchanged glances. This was escalating far beyond anything they had expected. Piers, to his credit, remained calm and professional. I think there might be some misunderstanding here, he said gently. Why don't we take a step back? You're a successful congresswoman. You have important things to say. That's why we invited you. Can we just have a normal conversation about the issues? Normal conversation? Crockett was practically vibrating with anger now. There's nothing normal about this. You bring us on here, you ask loaded questions, and then you act all innocent when we call you out. What loaded questions? Piers asked, his patience beginning to show the first signs of strain. I asked you about border security. That's a major issue in your district. How is that loaded? See, there you go again. Crockett pointed an accusatory finger at him, acting like you don't know what you're doing, like you're just some innocent journalist asking innocent questions. The studio audience was dead, silent now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was uncomfortable. This was watching someone self-destruct in real time. Look, Piers said, his voice taking on a slightly firmer tone. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, celebrities, activists. I ask tough questions, yes, but I ask them fairly. That's my job. If you don't want to answer questions about your policies, then perhaps you shouldn't have come on a talk show. That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Crockett's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Oh, so now you're telling me I shouldn't be here? Is that it? You don't think I belong on your precious show? That's not what I said at all, Piers replied quickly. I said if you don't want to discuss policy, maybe a political talk show isn't the right venue. That's completely different. No, it's not different, Crockett was shouting now. You're trying to silence me. You're trying to push me off this show because you don't like what I have to say. Piers looked directly into the camera, then back at his guest. I haven't even heard what you have to say yet because you haven't answered a single question. All I've asked is for you to explain your position on border security. And all I'm trying to tell you is that your question is racist. The word hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. Piers blinked. I'm sorry, what? You heard me, Crockett said, crossing her arms defiantly. Asking me about border security is racist. You wouldn't ask a white politician that question. I ask every politician about border security, Piers said slowly, as if speaking to a child. It's one of the biggest issues facing the country. I asked the Secretary of Homeland Security about it last week. I asked 3 senators about it this month. How is that racist? Because when you ask me, it's different, Crockett shot back. When you ask me, you're implying that I don't belong here either. The logic was so twisted, so divorced from reality, that even Piers seemed momentarily at a loss for words. That makes absolutely no sense, he finally said. You're a member of Congress. Border security is literally part of your job. How is asking you about your job racist? Crockett leaned forward, her voice dripping with contempt. Don't you dare try to lecture me about my job. I know exactly what my job is. My job is to fight against people like you, who try to keep people like me down. People like me? Piers asked. What does that mean exactly? You know exactly what it means. No, I really don't. Please, enlighten me. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Crockett sat back in her chair with a smug expression, as if she had just delivered some devastating blow. Piers, meanwhile, looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. I'm waiting, he said quietly. Please explain to me what you mean by people like me. Crockett rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. Like you don't know. Rich white men who think they can just steamroll over everyone else. Who think they own the conversation. I see. Piers nodded slowly. So you're making assumptions about me based on my race and gender. Is that correct? I'm not making assumptions, Crockett snapped. I'm stating facts. Facts? Piers leaned forward slightly. What facts? You don't know anything about my background. You don't know where I came from or what I've experienced. You're literally judging me based solely on how I look. I know enough, Crockett said dismissively. I know you've probably never struggled a day in your life. I know you've never had to fight for anything. Everything was just handed to you. The audience was beginning to murmur now. Even those who might have been sympathetic to Crockett initially were starting to feel uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. That's a fascinating theory, Piers said, his voice remaining steady despite the personal attacks. But since you seem to know so much about me, let me ask you something. Do you think it's appropriate for an elected official to make sweeping generalizations about people based on their race? Don't try to flip this around on me, Crockett said, wagging her finger at him. You're the one with the power here. You're the one with the platform. We both have platforms, Piers replied calmly. You're a sitting member of Congress. You represent hundreds of thousands of people. That's considerably more power than hosting a talk show. That's not the same thing, and you know it, Crockett shot back. You have media power. You can make people look however you want them to look. And how am I making you look right now? Piers asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you're making yourself look exactly how you want to look. Crockett's face darkened. Are you calling me stupid? I haven't called you anything, Piers said, raising his hand slightly. I asked you a simple question about border security, and you've spent the last 10 minutes accusing me of being racist without any evidence whatsoever. I don't need evidence, Crockett exploded. I can see it. I can feel it. The way you look at me, the way you talk to me, like I don't belong here. The only person who suggested you don't belong here is you, Piers pointed out. I invited you on the show because I thought you had something important to say. I was clearly mistaken. That hit a nerve. Crockett's eyes flashed with pure rage. There it is. There's your true face. You think you can just dismiss me like that? I'm not dismissing you, Piers said, his patience finally showing signs of wearing thin. I'm trying to understand why you came on a political talk show if you don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about politics, Crockett shouted. I want to talk about how people like you use your platforms to silence people like me. But I'm not silencing you, Piers said, gesturing toward her with obvious frustration. You're literally on television right now. You have a microphone. You can say whatever you want. How is that being silenced? Because you're trying to control the narrative. Crockett was fully unhinged now. You ask me questions designed to make me look bad, and then when I don't play along, you act like I'm the problem. What questions have I asked that were designed to make you look bad? Piers demanded. Please, be specific. Quote me one question that was unfair. Crockett opened her mouth, then closed it. She opened it again, then seemed to realize she had painted herself into a corner. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable seconds. See? Piers said gently. You can't, because there weren't any. I asked you about border security. That's it. One question about a major policy issue. The way you asked it was racist, Crockett said weakly, clearly grasping for straws now. How? Piers pressed. What about the words, "Can you explain your stance on border security to our viewers?" was racist? Break it down for me. Crockett's jaw worked silently. She was trapped and she knew it. But instead of backing down or apologizing, she decided to double down in the worst possible way. "You know what?" she said, her voice taking on a nasty edge. "I don't have to explain anything to you. You're just another irrelevant has been trying to stay relevant by picking on successful black women." The audience gasped audibly. Even the cameraman looked shocked. Piers, however, remained remarkably composed. "I see," he said quietly. "So now I'm irrelevant and washed up. Is that your professional assessment? If the shoe fits?" Crockett said with a cruel smile. "Well, this irrelevant is currently sitting across from a sitting congresswoman who apparently can't answer a basic question about policy without having a complete meltdown on national television," Piers replied, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel now. "So perhaps we should reevaluate who's really struggling with relevance here." Crockett's face went purple with rage. "How dare you? How dare you sit there and insult me like that? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Piers said. "You're someone who came on my show, refused to answer questions, made baseless accusations of racism, attacked me personally based on my race and gender, and then called me irrelevant when I tried to get the interview back on track. Is that an accurate summary?" "You're twisting everything," Crockett screeched. "You're making me sound crazy." "I'm not making you sound like anything," Piers said wearily. "I'm simply describing what has happened in the last 15 minutes. If you don't like how that sounds, perhaps you should consider why." Crockett stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. "I'm done with this. I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me like this." "Nobody has disrespected you," Piers said, remaining seated. "The only person who has been disrespectful in this conversation is you. You've made personal attacks. You've made accusations without evidence. And you've refused to engage with any actual issues." "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Crockett pointed at him accusingly. "You bring us on here just to humiliate us. Well, I'm not going to be your entertainment." "You're absolutely right," Piers said, standing up now as well. "This has been highly entertaining, but probably not in the way you intended." The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of the cameras and the sound of Crockett's heavy breathing. She was standing now, towering over the desk, her face twisted with rage and embarrassment. Piers remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes now. The professional courtesy was still there, but underneath it was the steely resolve of someone who had finally reached his limit. "You think this is funny?" Crockett demanded, her voice cracking slightly. "You think ruining people's careers is some kind of joke?" "I think," Piers said slowly, "that you're doing a perfectly good job of that all by yourself. I haven't said anything that wasn't true, and I certainly haven't done anything to ruin your career. You've managed that entirely on your own." "Liar!" Crockett slammed her hand down on the desk, causing her microphone to jump. "You planned this whole thing? You brought me on here knowing exactly what you were going to do." "What exactly did I plan?" Piers asked, his voice maddeningly reasonable. "To ask you about your policy positions? To treat you like any other politician? If that's some kind of elaborate scheme, then I'm guilty as charged." The audience was transfixed now. This wasn't just a political interview gone wrong. This was a complete psychological breakdown happening in real time, broadcast to millions of people. "Stop acting innocent," Crockett screamed. "Stop pretending like you don't know what you're doing. You're just like all the rest of them." "All the rest of who?" Piers asked. "Journalists? People who ask questions? People who expect elected officials to actually answer those questions? People who hate successful black women?" Crockett shot back. "People who can't stand to see us in positions of power?" Piers shook his head sadly. "Do you hear yourself right now? Do you understand how you sound? You're a member of Congress. You're literally in one of the most powerful positions in the country, and you're standing here screaming at a talk show host because he asked you about border security? Don't you patronize me." Crockett's voice was getting higher and more shrill by the second. "Don't you dare talk down to me like I'm some kind of child." "Then don't act like one," Piers said quietly, and the words hit like a physical blow. Crockett's mouth fell open. For a moment, she was speechless, and in that silence, the full weight of what had just happened seemed to crash down on her. She looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience, at the crew members who were all staring at her with a mixture of shock and pity. "Did you just?" she whispered. Then her voice rose again. "Did you just call me a child?" "I said don't act like one," Piers corrected. "There's a difference. You're a grown woman. You're an elected official. You represent people, and you're having a tantrum on national television because someone asked you to do your job. My job? Crockett's laugh was bitter and hysterical. My job is to fight for my constituents. My job is to stand up to bullies like you. Your job, Piers said firmly, is to represent your district in Congress, to vote on legislation, to understand policy, to be able to articulate your positions when asked, none of which you've demonstrated any ability to do tonight. Crockett's face went through a series of expressions: rage, hurt, embarrassment, and finally, a kind of desperate fury. You know what? Fine. You want to know my position on border security? Here it is. The whole thing is racist. The entire concept of border security is just code for keeping brown people out of the country. The audience stirred uneasily. Even those who might have agreed with stricter immigration policies seemed taken aback by the blanket statement. That's your position? Piers asked. That border security as a concept is inherently racist? That's right, Crockett said defiantly. And anyone who supports it is supporting racism. So the millions of Americans who are concerned about immigration policy, including many immigrants themselves, are all racists? Piers pressed. If they support racist policies, then yes, Crockett said stubbornly. Including your own constituents who voted for you partly because you promised to address immigration issues? Piers asked. Crockett faltered for a moment. That's different. How is it different? Because I was talking about comprehensive immigration reform, not just sealing the border like some kind of fortress. But you just said the entire concept of border security is racist, Piers pointed out. Comprehensive immigration reform still involves border security. So by your own logic, you were promising to support racist policies. Crockett opened her mouth, then closed it. She was trapped again, caught in the contradiction of her own extreme statements. You're twisting my words again, she said weakly. I'm using your exact words, Piers replied. You said the entire concept of border security is racist. Those were your words, not mine. I meant. Crockett started, then stopped. She looked around the studio again, and this time there was something like panic in her eyes. She was finally realizing what she had done, how she looked, how this would play when it aired. You know what? She said, her voice suddenly much quieter but somehow more venomous. I don't have to stand here and take this abuse from you. I'm leaving. She started to remove her microphone, fumbling with the wire in her anger and embarrassment. Of course you are, Piers said sadly. Because that's what people do when they can't defend their positions. They walk away. Crockett froze, the microphone halfway off. What did you say? I said you're walking away because you can't defend your positions, Piers repeated clearly. It's easier to claim persecution than to actually engage with difficult questions. I can defend my positions just fine, Crockett snapped, the microphone forgotten. Then do it, Piers challenged. Sit back down, answer the question about border security. Have an actual conversation instead of throwing accusations around. For a moment, it looked like she might actually do it. She stood there, wavering, clearly torn between her anger and some small remaining part of her that knew she was making a terrible mistake. But pride won out over wisdom. No, she said finally. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction. I'm not going to let you use me for your ratings. My ratings are fine, Piers said dryly. But thank you for your concern. Crockett finally got her microphone off and threw it down on the chair. This interview is over, and don't you dare air this. Don't you dare make me look bad. Piers looked at her with something approaching genuine sadness. I don't need to make you look bad. You've done that yourself, and this is live television, so it's already aired. The color drained from Crockett's face as the full implications of that statement hit her. Live television, millions of viewers, no editing, no second chances. You, she whispered, then seemed to lose the ability to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, Piers said, turning to address the camera directly, I want to apologize to our viewers for what you've just witnessed. This was supposed to be a serious discussion about policy issues. Instead, you got to see what happens when someone who should be a serious political leader chooses to have a meltdown instead of doing their job. Don't you apologize for me? Crockett found her voice again. Don't you dare. But Piers wasn't done. We'll be right back after this break, he said calmly, hopefully with a guest who's actually prepared to have a conversation. And with that, Crockett stormed off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and millions of viewers who had just witnessed one of the most spectacular self-destructions in television history.